Let me do it good, let me do it like I should. Won't you let me do it?
So, a few years ago, a couple of human beings, human creatures, human idiots, Max, a couple of human idiots befriended me. Befriended me? Adopted me? I don't know. Befriended me. I have no other word that sufficiently describes their actions other than this. Why would they befriend me, you ask? I don't know. Why would anyone befriend anyone, really? Although I am beginning to think, idiot friends, hello, welcome, that friendship in any capacity, but men and women, women and women, and those very rare, beautiful moments where men and women who aren't fucking each other somehow manage to build something meaningful out of their connection. I am starting to think that maybe this is the only truly non-bullshit relationship we human animals ever get to experience, however it shows up. Of course, I'm not claiming anything original here. Like you, I am nothing more really than a talking monkey, doing what primates do. But still, friendship, I would say, you would say probably too, might be the one thing that cuts through the crap. I consider my clients, my patients, if you prefer, friends. Not in the sense that we hang out, but because simply, for me, the moment someone shares something vulnerable or reflective from within their metaphysical thinking, feeling, sensing inner chambers, their heart and soul, if you like, I can't help but feel a kind of love towards them, I guess. How often do you get to experience the somewhat unfiltered, true, raw, lived reality of another human being in this way, and thus get to love them? I don't know. I mean, every day, possibly, if you're on YouTube, as I am. Plenty of people doing that on here. And I suppose that's where the like and subscribe love maybe originally stems from. But it's a little bit different, isn't it? A bit of a parasocial puppet show, which can still be very meaningful, but different from the sort of the messy to and fro, the living with, the living in and through another's life in a somewhat intimate way. And all of this, I think, kind of ties into that whole unconditional positive regard thing of my therapy religion, my therapy creed. But UPR, I would say, doesn't really necessarily require actual friendship. I mean, it can be a sort of performance, right? As can empathy, as can congruence. The UPR of friendship, I would say, is perhaps closer to the UPR of romantic love. That particular UPR, which quite often will not last the fading of the cascading fuckathon hormones. But in friendship, in camaraderie, that force perhaps has greater potential to live on and possibly even grow further, particularly if these friendships are forged through a core value shared by each participant, such as a profound love of certain kinds of literature or music or art, or football. So I gather from the primal roar of those socially sanctioned mobs that roam this island and ride the tube trains on weekends, especially near Wembley where I live, turning every carriage into their own little personal jungle gym of screaming, shouting, alcohol-fueled, dick-swinging savagery. But I digress. So let's see, where did these earnest games between Mark and Tomek and I kick off? Where did our friendship commence? Well, I guess it sort of started with me suggesting to them for their texting podcast a film, Charlie Kaufman's Synecdoche, New York, which they got stuck into with great aplomb.
And everyone is everyone, so
That's
you experience
exactly
everybody.
What I was gonna say.
Yeah, so
that is
but I think
that is such a beautiful line. Everyone is everyone.
yeah, for me it was a bit trite. Love you, Steve, but I didn't really like this film.
And then they invited me, even though I was being a bit of an idiot at the time, to talk about Fernando Pessoa's book of Disquiet.
I don't know. I can't speak for anyone else, but, I'm doing it for me. Lawrence said, it's not art for art's sake. it's art for my sake. And that maybe Pessoa would have had a similar credo.
100%. I really do think that, and we see this in his life, and we see this in his writings, right? I mean, it's like he basically says again and again and again that without this project, whatever the project is, he's lost. He's a goner. He really is. I mean, he really is. He has to. He goes under without that. And then we did the I Ching as a deviant text. Yes, you heard right, a deviant text, which is to say any text or phenomenon that deviates from the traditional boundaries. We might even equally call it an idiot text, where the concept of the text itself extends beyond just the written word, so including films, music, visual art, tweets, natural phenomena, graffiti, anything that can be read, interpreted, or experienced as carrying meaning is potentially fair game for these lads, and they're coming up to season 4 of that, so subscribe. Spotify, etc. Links below. About these as kind of like rhythmic patterns. So like thunder is like doosh, doo, doo.
Oh, like a megaphone?
Yeah, like a megaphone, something like that. It's kind of throwing. So the yin lines are kind of the
echo,
the sound waves being thrown out from this this yang source, whatever that is, the voice of God or whatever, and then it kind of the reverberations reach our ears, stimulate our eardrums, sort of thing, right?
Okay.
What else did we do? Well, Mark and I got together to have a conversation for his Books Are Burning podcast about one of his own deviant texts, a travelogue called Pilgrimizing, in which Cadmus and Harmony, a mythic foil for Mark and his wife, navigating the, as you would expect, somewhat charged and disillusioning landscapes of Israel and Palestine in 2014. A narrative dense with disillusionment, sardonic humor, and a kind of mytho-literary baklava that layers the ancient and modern worlds impeccably, I would say. I should have maybe asked you this as the first question. What is it, the book is called Pilgrimizing. What does it mean to be a pilgrim for you? And what is the difference between a pilgrim and a traveler?
I think just what we talked about, like the pilgrim is on a spiritual mission. It's travel writing, but with a spiritual purpose. You're going in search of some connection. I would define it that way. It's the connection with the Genius Loci, the spirit of the place that you're visiting. So that's it, right?
What was that connection for you? We also did a T&E session recently about our shit, our creative shit, this stuff, because Mark is also content creator par excellence, music, visual collages, podcasts, translations, including Pessoa's Message, Aeschylus's Persians. Haven't read that one yet, but Mark, I want to. And currently working on a version, I believe, of the Tao Te Ching with his wife. Sign me up for that. Tomek, also creative beast, music, weird and wonderful art projects, like his travel, audio collages, teaching English lit, running various lecture series. Busy boy, busy lad is young Tomek, that fresh-faced urchin, still in his 40s. Oh, go on then.
Wady i zalety.
Hierarchię wartości, obowiązki, przyjemności, hip-hopowa podróż do przeszłości. Wszystko ma swoje priorytety.
Niestety.
Wszystko ma swoje
Wady i zalety.
hierarchię wartości, obowiązki, przyjemności, hip-hopowa podróż do przeszłości.
Anyway, having done a whole bunch of these recordings in the last 6 months, I've realized a couple of things that I wasn't fully conscious of before that I'm going to now tell you about. So stay with me. Things that maybe express something new. I don't know, new, old, whatever, about this cultural moment. I mean, you too have probably noticed, right? There's been this explosion in recent years of these long, in-depth serious? Yeah, serious. Soul-searching conversations, mainly jizzed out, of course, by dudes. Also some dudesses there, sitting down, recording themselves while I'm out of breath in deep dialogue. And then, putting their sessions up on YouTube. And sure, some of these folks are monetizing the shit out of that in different ways. But even those of us who barely get a few hundred listens in terms of our idiocies, we keep on trucking. We want to do this too, and we are doing this. Why? Well, if you're someone who craves genuine connection, and I think we all do to a certain extent, right? Even though not all of us clearly want to explore the furthest recesses of our minds, our hearts, our souls, the intricate metaphysics of being human. No, clearly not. Everyone is hungry for that, but we all want some kind of intimacy. And for those of us who are hungry for that, what are the options for doing this? Some idiots will literally pay, maybe even you, a university business, one of those money-making academic machines, thousands upon thousands of pounds, dollars, shekels, whatever, to do a bullshit literature or film or art MA, largely just to give themselves, in seminars and one-to-ones, the chance to connect in real time with real people and have this kind of deep dialogue, which outside of therapy or midnight existential pub or bong sessions is pretty thin on the ground for your average Joe or Joanna, your average idiot, and perhaps also Mark and Tomic too. In our ancient past, there were rituals for this kind of thing. For men in particular, there were structured ways to connect at a true level of depth with a kind of respectful, but also, pretty unabashed sort of honesty, and with friendship, through friendship. Women, I think, often find this a lot easier, more natural to sort of slip into these spaces of connection, at least with each other. Different story when they're doing that with somebody, possessing a penis, particularly if that penis might want to be inside them. But for men, this can feel more precarious, which is why I think we need these formal ritual frameworks, a reason for us to get together. And I don't know why, but we just do. Prime example, football, or any sporting event for that matter. And that's what I think these dudes, us dudes, are doing. We're sitting down, we're picking a topic, we're thinking it through, we're talking, not as a performance per se, although there is a little bit, not for the likes, not for the subscriptions, but as a kind of ritualized offering to each other, to the universe, whatever. The recording itself, I think, is part of the ritual. It lends the conversation a certain gravity, an acknowledgement that this isn't just a chat at the pub or some online back and forth. It's space for listening deeply, speaking truthfully, and meeting one another in the very depths of our being, I guess. It's philosophy for the masses, which you could say is exactly what philosophy should fucking well be about, and once was. I mean, does anyone give a shit about what academic philosophers are pontificating on about at the moment? Well, I don't. Sorry, not sorry. But I'm more than happy, as perhaps you are too, to watch two intelligent and sincere human beings having a philosophical chat about something on YouTube. Yeah, that floats my boat. And maybe if you're here, you are of a similar bent. The other realization I've had, one that I think forms whatever glue that binds the three of us, or at least bound us three musketeers initially, is that all three of us are ecstasy chasers, ecstasy seekers, whether through music, conversation, substances, or whatever exquisite deviances we can unearth. We're all looking to break free in some ecstasy-focused way. We're all trying to escape the freaking ego cage, this endless loop of thoughts and emotional churning, and touch, feel something out there or in here. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows even what that is, right? The divine, the mystical depths of our being, the being of others. Words. Go and read Hamlet, etc. But it's kind of cool, whatever it is. It's kind of cool. And I think we, Mark and I, touch into this very, very deeply in the conversation that follows, which I get that you might not have the time or the patience to wade through, whatever it is, 3 hours of us kind of sparring in and out of these spaces, which is fine because the conversation itself was the cake. The eyes The ears, listening in, liking and subscribing are the icing on the cake. I mean, I like icing, so, please do like and subscribe to this channel, also to that of Mark Will. See the pinned comment and the link in the descriptions below. But other than that, enjoy this episode of Books Are Burning, which Mark has kindly let me repost here in Idiotville for us idiots to savor and reflect on further. And I don't know, tell me in the comment section what reading is currently giving you a hard-on, which could also be a clit hard-on. Yeah, let's be fair, I'm not like, right? Okay.
Here we go. All right. Yeah. I might as well leave it in there. Yeah.
Let me do it sweet, let me do it and repeat. Won't you let me do it?
Let's do it.
Let me do it right, let me do it all night. Won't you let me?
All right, let's get into it here. The Idiots 2024 Reading Revelations as shared with Mark Will. That would be me. All right, so before we look at what you actually read, you wanted to talk about the kind of reader the idiot is. And by the way, thank you for the wonderful slides. It makes my job as host so much easier.
Oh, my pleasure. Listening to do them, yeah.
So what can I ask you about this? Like, these are different types of the reader that you think you are, or it depends on your mood, or like what's the most prevalent type? Just for those listening, we've got the forgetful hedonist, the ecstasy addict, the page-bound lover, the story streamer.
I've actually changed that one because I made last-minute edits, but then of course, for some reason I thought they would just pop up, right? I actually changed the page-bound lover to the page-bound narcissist, but I'll explain that in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then finally, we've got the Z Library Outlaw. So take this wherever you want. You want to start at the top with the forgetful hedonist?
Yeah. Really, for me, this is just a 5-point disclaimer, because I feel that when people come to this kind of chat, they are expecting the person who is going to talk about books to be able to deliver a certain, a certain sort of somewhat rarefied, not necessarily rarefied, but at least a certain functional kind of communication, like, for example, being able to remember the names of the characters in the books you love the most. And this is just me kind of essentially kind of saying to everybody, if you're coming for that, you ain't going to get any of that, because right, take point one, the forgetful hedonist. I remember so little of what I read, other than impressions, other than more kind of the feelings I had whilst reading.
And then do you associate those feelings with particular works or particular authors, or do you forget those as well?
Oh no, I remember, because again, being a four, everything that the four idiot is about is trying to build up, trying to kind of make a kind of patchwork of various. We all do this to some extent, but some of us do this, sort of more so than others. Kind of like I don't know. I have no self, so all I have to do, I have to kind of take like books and music and various other things, and then sort of like paste them, kind of paper mache them over me. That's what art and culture is really about, so that then I can go, this is who I am, and without those things, and in a way, that's what I think in some ways, art functions, is the function of art for me, that it sort of allows me to actually see myself or see the outlines of a self, and also the outlines of the self that I want to be, as opposed to the, the sort of blah, that's in the center of it all.
It allows you to create an identity.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of things
teenage.
here.
I mean, I'm 53, right? But it's something we do as teenagers, classically, and then we maybe a lot of people outgrow that, which is like, you find your favorite band, you find your favorite whatever it is, and that also gives you a way to be someone almost in the world, right? Like, I'm a Radiohead fan, and kind of, again, it's archetypal. People sort of know what that means. That then, right? If you say I'm a Radiohead fan, you are setting yourself up in the world as a certain kind of person, I think, as well. And that does a lot of work. Then you don't have to really do much explanation. That's quite nice, because you could just say, well, I'm a Radiohead fan, and everyone kind of knows what kind of person you are.
Maybe now it means you're pro-Zionist, but we'll leave Tom York and one of the Greenwood brothers out of it. But so a couple of things here. Hedonist is an interesting choice because, the hedonist is all about pleasure. Is reading pleasurable for you? Or is it just something necessary to, like, for the purpose of research so that you can do your content creation? Is it always enjoyable? Yeah.
But certainly for me, and this has become more and more the case, right? It used to be slightly different, but more and more, as I approach death, and death can come at any time, I see absolutely no point in really, you'll push yourself through the first few chapters, but I see no point in reading other than hedonistically. One person who I really love and I associate with is another Will, but with his Will in as his first name as opposed to his second, and that is, of course, Will Self.
Yeah.
And I was listening to an interview with Will Self, who's just Will Self. He's just such a great speaker and raconteur, and he was talking about how he reads, and I was quite surprised. But in a way, I think he would describe himself. Well, he's actually the remember everything, as we know, hedonist. But he was saying how he has, but that's also because he's a brutal motherfucker. Kind of 8 Will to the max. But he was saying how he sort of he feels no obligation when he's reading to like, if you like the greatest work of literature, if he is not getting his rocks off, as it were, which comes into the ecstasy addict, because he's also an ecstasy addict, which he chased through various substances as well, right? He's not getting his rocks off. It ain't happening. And the way he describes his reading, which I found very interesting, because I've always seen him as like a very comprehensive reader, like, he's read everything and he reads it through all the way, is that he says he doesn't read like that. He'll read a bit of this, a bit of that. He's got like loads of things, different things on the go. And I'm that kind of reader as well. I'm kind of like, okay, literature is a sort of, I see it more as like a buffet table. And yes, I'll get really into maybe a particular dish, and I'll keep on going back and I'll finish it all off like I did with the Mishima. But I feel absolutely no guilt whatsoever for leaving whatever halfway through, or even 3 pages through, and thinking, well, I'll come back to that, but that looks more enticing over there.
Oh, interesting. See, I'm exactly the opposite. I am what I call a completionist. So not only once I start something, if I consider it worth my while to start, and that, there's a certain bar that has to be passed before I'll even bother with it. But if I've decided, okay, this particular book is worth my attention, once I start it, I will finish it. Very rarely do I abandon it. I'm not saying it's never happened. Of course it has, but that is very rare. I feel if I do that, I feel like I'm somehow cheating in the, in the game of life or the game of literature, or I don't know what. Of course, I can't explain it, and it's pretty absurd, but I cannot do that. I cannot just give up. It's like it's like I'm a quitter, you know. I once it started, I don't go halfway. I go all the way. And not only that, if I decide, okay, this, I have this notion of the personal canon, right? Like there's the Western canon and the world literature canon and all that. I have my own personal canon. And when an author, let's say, has entered, I've deemed them worthy of canonical status in my own personal canon. I am a completionist, and I will read everything that I can from that particular author. So, like Mishima, for me, he's canonical, and pretty much everything that's been translated into English, I've read, including a couple of biographies on him, and then films related to his work. Like I consume all of that because it's kind of like he's my teacher or guru, you know. And so I've got to try to understand everything he's trying to tell me. Same with Proust, Joyce. You know, recently, sometime around the period when I got into Mishima, Burroughs became very important to me, and I just read everything from Naked Lunch on. Oddly, I still haven't read Junkie and Queer, but now that movie's coming out, maybe I'll get back into those. But so I feel like I'm losing my mind if I do that, if I take the buffet approach, just as an interesting side note.
It is an ADHD, I would say, pretty flaky way of reading. And that's why when you talk, I am genuinely full of admiration, and also, you know, also because I want to be that. I want to be that kind of reader. I don't want to be the kind of reader I am. I don't want to be the forgetful hedonist and the page-bound narcissist and all. You know, I don't want to be that. But hey, I am that. So I've got to live with that. Just quickly, sorry, I've just realised I'm freezing my bollocks off here because the heating is not at a winter temperature. Let me just quickly switch it up.
Can you still hear me?
All
right, this is an interlude where we can play some heating music.
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm back.
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned the ADHD reader. Maybe the opposite of that is the OCD reader. So, like,
yeah, that's a good way
I think, you know, instinctively, naturally speaking, I'm more of the ADHD reader too. And in fact, when I first started reading seriously as a teenager, I could not focus. I couldn't complete one page. And so I forced myself to do it. And that's how I became the kind of reader that I am now. And maybe it's just a fear of going back to being that clueless, you know, undisciplined, moronic teenager that I was, that prevents me from, you know, reading in that manner, or that necessitates that I read in the manner I do, if that makes sense. Like I just feel like I must do it. It's a compulsion. There's the OCD, right? But if I don't do it, I just feel like it's a sin almost. It's like a religious dereliction of duty.
But I would also say, to kind of give a more, again, maybe mystical, transcendent spin on it, it's also a devotion, right? Because, you know, and I think it's also it's one that maybe we all need more of. We need more of your devotional reading, because it's actually, I would imagine, right, that after you have done that devotional practice, you come out with more, something. I would suggest that more is kind of something more worthy or deeper or more resonant is imprinted into your cells than with the ADHD reader, who, you know, again, it's like, okay, yeah, it's like someone who gets high. lovely experience, but what really are we left with? The next day, nothing. Says a person who has done a lot of that in the last few years. Nothing. And that is disappointing, and I think is not soul nourishing. I would say that your kind of reading, whether we like it or not, at a psychospiritual level, is soul nourishing, and the extreme version of the ADHD reader is possibly even soul destroying.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far, and I don't want to, try to establish a hierarchy and say one is better than the other, but it's just for me personally, I feel unmoored. Maybe it has to do with my record keeping, right? Like I have, for the past, 25, 30 years, I've kept pretty consistent records of like everything I read on a yearly basis, and I can't like write it down until I finished it. If I start something but don't finish it, I can't put it on the list. It doesn't count. It's like I started something but I didn't finish it. Nope, that doesn't go on the list. So there's like an obligation, self-imposed, to finish so that it can be recorded, and then it's official, and it just remains in my raggedy ass notebook that no one else looks at. Although, now I post my annual reading list on Substack and Goodreads and whatever, but it's just for my own personal, I don't know if it's satisfaction, development, research, I call it. It's research, because that's the fuel that is necessary for the, creative energy I need to make whatever it is I'm working on, books, music, a podcast, whatever. Like I need that nourishment. But the other part of this phrase, forgetful, is also interesting, because with the development of, I know you listen to a lot of audiobooks. That's not really something I do, but I have read quite a few ebooks, and I have found that I retain almost nothing from ebooks that I read, especially if they happen to be fiction. Some nonfiction, I can recall nonfiction I've read on the iPad, for example, but fiction, it just, I lose it. I can't retain it. It's very strange. I just wonder, is it something about the tactile quality, right? Like I've got a book, I'm holding it in my hands, I can physically turn the pages rather than swipe. I can take a pen or pencil and underline. I can write notes if I want to. I mean, you can do that with an ebook too. You can highlight with your finger. You can even highlight different colors. Like I've done that. Like, favorite passages highlighted in yellow, important names and places blue, themes pink or whatever, right? You can't do that. You could if you had highlighters, I guess, but I don't. Like with regular paperbacks or hardcovers, I'm just using a pen. So I don't have an answer to that, but I've read that there have been studies saying that, yeah, it's actually true. You can't retain as much from ebooks as you can from like paper books, whether paperback or hardcover. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I was looking up just while you were talking that it's a book I haven't read, but I think it would be a good one to dip into. This book by Marianne Wolf called Proust and the Squid. Proust is popping up again, something like that. I think, right, which is about the reading brain and all the sort of the studies that have been done on that. And yeah, again, if we ever get to them, if we ever actually get to the books, because this is a great thing, we could probably talk for about 3 hours just on this. But yeah, most of the books that, possibly even all the books that we're going to look at, I don't think, even though I have paper copies of, in fact, a number of them, because I buy them. We're down to the, this devotional aspect. If a book has really, really affected me, I will buy the paper copy. But it's more like to have it almost as an object rather than even to look at it. The idea is always to read it again on the page. But I think probably everything that I'm going to talk about today has been, again, to pick up on the story streamer, has been listened to with Speechify initially, but now 11 Labs, or 11 Reader as it's now called, I think, which is the free app, and incredible if you're looking for something free that can read anything, or or on an iPad. And,
okay.
and that also adds to, and that's something about the Ecstasy as well. I'm trying to kind of compress this all so we can move to the next slide, but it's something about the Ecstasy as well, because I think sometimes maybe I can also get more of an ecstatic hit if I'm like in motion, because very often I'm walking or I'm doing something and I'm listening, and so I'm getting, it's like I'm able to be sort of moving, and my brain is occupied, and somehow that seems to increase ecstatic potential for me, as opposed to sometimes, again, we've all become. I'm very aware of the fact of how more ADHD my head is due to screens and whatnots, and so that seems to be more of an ADHD kind of setup now for us, right? That you've got to have like 3 things going on at the same time. And if you've just got you and the page, in a way it's wonderful, but it can also be like, oh, but hang on, shouldn't something else be happening too whilst I'm looking at this sentence?
Yeah. Can't I watch a YouTube video and listen to music while I read?
Exactly. Yeah.
Isn't that, and maybe it is.
The answer is actually
maybe it
no.
is possible.
You can't if you actually want to give yourself fully, which is why, when I am listening to whatever I'm listening to, I have to be either walking or doing housework, doing something where I'm total autopilot. Otherwise, I won't. I might as well not even have it there. Yeah.
You don't have the necessary focus and attention.
No.
Yeah. Well, this word ecstasy is, it appears in several of your slides. Should we wait to discuss that in greater detail, or I hear that word?
Let's jump ahead. But let's maybe not linger on this, because this, again, as I say, this is more of just a disclaimer. But the thing we haven't mentioned yet, which I'll just throw in there, because I'm also, even though I've kind of sent this link to you and Tomek, is what do you think of Z Library, right? Because Z Library for me was just like, I grew up in South Africa, and it was very, very hard to get our hands on books and music, and because it was, coming from the other side of the world, and when it arrived, it would cost the earth. And so ever since I was a child, I always had the sense that of there not being enough, like having this voracious appetite, and they're just not being able to get the stuff I wanted. The books I wanted were not in the libraries. I could never afford to go and buy them. And then now we have this thing called Z Library. Anyway, put the thing in, which is this totally illegal website, but it really is. It now everything's there. Everything's there, and I just feel like it's an utter godsend. But I could also understand, particularly for you I don't know how you would feel. I did actually look. You're not on there, but how would you feel if you went onto Z Library and Ernest Games was there for everyone as a free download?
Well, my self-publishing guru J.J. Green says, like, in most cases, the exposure is more important than the potential loss of
I agree.
income. So, at this particular point in my so-called career, like, I'd probably be okay with it. I wouldn't try to have
give
it
me the
taken
word,
down.
and I'm more than happy to. I'm more than happy to leak some Mark Will onto Z Library, because also, I don't know,
Yeah.
I sort of see it like, you talk about the canon, right?
Yeah.
That is the canon of everything. That is
Yeah.
Borges's. That's that Borgesian. Borges saw it all, right? It's the Library of Babel. Everything is there, and if you are, as long as you've got an internet connection, you can be the poorest. Whoever, right, living in a country where there is, you just can't get any of this stuff, but you can go on a Z Library and you can find anything. And I don't know, they've tried to, God damn it, they have tried to shut that down a million times. They've chased them, they've litigated, they have, and I am on the side of Z Library. I'm like, go, the Z Library. Yeah. It's like Z Library rides again, because it's been shut down for a while, and I've had to go onto the dark web even at times to find it. But they keep on springing back up, because I actually believe they're, as much as I'm also on the side of writers, and writers need to make money, etc. But, I feel like fundamentally they're on the side of giving literature to everyone, and that has to be a good thing. Not just literature, giving knowledge to everyone.
Well, the whole notion of copyright is a very recent conception, right? That there was no copyright in Shakespeare's day. So this is how great works of literature from the past were transmitted. They were shared, they were passed down, they were pirated, I guess you could say. I mean, I think in the Don Quixote episode on texting, we were talking about how, Cervantes was actually condemning the people who had pirated his books in part 2 of Don Quixote. But that it's, even before copyrights, there was like a sense of ownership with certain texts. But I think we have to be kind of flexible about that. Like if the purpose of Z Library, or Z Library, sorry, is, it sounds to me like it's the Napster of literature, right? So if the purpose,
100%,
if the purpose is to, of course, maybe that's not a good example, because Napster made Sean Parker a lot of money, right? Like if some asshole millionaire, billionaire is making money off of it, that's different, right? It's like, if it's a kind of Amazon type thing where Jeff Bezos is using the profits of nobodies like me to buy himself another boat or whatever, another yacht. Not that he's going to do that with just my works, but like the millions of nobodies who are publishing their stuff on his site, that's different, right? Yeah. But if it's just a matter of getting my work into the hands of more people who, might be interested, might later buy a book or donate to my Substack, or, subscribe to my YouTube channel or something like that, that's different. I mean, it's kind of
I
like...
actually think that that's a brilliant analogy, because maybe, right, maybe if the publishers can get the fuck out of their, 19th, 20th century head business model, right, I would suggest that the way forward is like a Spotify of books, because I would have no problem whatsoever paying whatever it is, whatever I pay Spotify, 10, 12 quid a month, to have access to absolutely everything, to have access to Z Library, and to have access in a way that also gives me greater usability, utility, functionality. I would love that. I would love, even though, as we know, Spotify is also problematic, but at least you could argue it's a sort of a halfway house. But I don't think publishers are ever going to do that because, for all sorts of reasons, and it's a different, they're different objects as well, and that's
there are publishers and there are publishers. I just recently read, last year. This is one of my 2024 reading highlights. I don't know if it's a highlight, but it's something I read. Roberto Calasso's The Art of the Publisher.
All right.
And so he talks about the publisher as a cultural taste maker or a force for influencing the culture, and his own Adelphi books or whatever his imprint was called. I mean, they're not like, they're anti-Amazon, and they're like anti even ebook and certainly audiobook. Like, they're all about, the quality of the pages, the font, the artwork that's chosen, the cover design. So that it really is the art of the publisher. That's something that with my own Cadmus and Harmony Media imprint, I want to, be on the side of, I guess, or support or advocate for. But that's different from, just take any random mainstream publisher that you can think of, and here's one. What are these people called? FSG with their fucking fish logo. That is, what are they? Farrar, Strauss,
and Giroux.
And Giroux, yeah. So, I'm not like concerned for their well-being, but for the small independent publishers, like, my own imprint, Cadmus and Harmony Media, like, when I first started this venture, I did conceive of a hierarchy. It's right. It's like, yes, we'll produce ebooks, we'll produce audiobooks, but the ultimate textual experience is the paperback or hardcover if there happens to be a hardcover version. So fine, download the ebook, read that, download the audiobook, listen to that. But at the end of the day, if you want the ultimate experience, you should purchase the actual book, because we did spend time.
People are now doing
on the cover
with albums, I guess, right? I mean, people are going back to like vinyl and things like that, and maybe that's the way to do it. I mean, make all the stuff, make that free.
Yes.
Actually, just say to people like, right, if you want to get a sense of it, because I actually think that's how it works. I do genuinely believe, and I see that with myself, that I'll read something or I'll listen to it. And if I fall in love with it, I will go and buy it quite often, because because I want it, and I can only really feel like it's mine. I can only really feel like this Simon Critchley's Mysticism is mine with its amazing Bernini red. And again, it's also the art. It's such a beautiful, sexy book. Like I can only really own it if I buy the book, and I have the ebook, I have the audio book. I mean, it's on Spotify. You can listen to it on Spotify, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as about being able to wrap your fingers around it, even if you don't crack it open and actually, do the page. And it also, because he does, he's in a very sort of Seboldian way. It's got these incredible sort of black and white pictures. This is an amazing picture of right at the end of I mean, just incredible kind of pictures. This is an incredible picture of, where is it? Nick Cave, like a very young Nick Cave, in the midst of some, I don't know, in his heroin chic phase. Yeah, that's what you want books for, right? That's what books are about, I think.
Yeah, so if we conceive of ebooks and audiobooks as lost leaders, right? They're just basically, they're for promotional purposes. It's like a music video, right? Like, oh, you like this, then buy the album. You like this, then buy the paperback. I mean, you mentioned Sartre earlier. I'm thinking of a comment he made once. He's like, writers' livelihoods and their well-being vary with the times. In some ages, they're well-fed, and in other ages, not so much. So maybe this is the period when we're not well-fed, and okay, so that's just what we have to accept. Maybe there are ways we can improve our lot, but maybe we're just in an age where we have to basically accept donations. I think I've been thinking about how to sustain this enterprise, and so maybe the best model is just one of donation, right? Like, if you appreciate this content, please buy a book. Here's a link. If you appreciate this content, you can donate here. You can become a subscriber here. Just whatever you're comfortable with. It's all free. Take sample it as you will. Take of it what you want. But if you value it, then you're welcome to make a donation. I'm going to keep doing it regardless. It's here no matter what, but this is the situation. Like, this is not really sustainable if there is no kind of financial support. Or, I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe I could do it indefinitely, but maybe not.
Shall we move to some actual books? Well, actually, we're gonna have a poem, and I think that's going to be the perfect palate cleanser. You know what this video is going to be, which is great. I'm loving it. This is going to be like one of the rabbit holes that I get sucked into on YouTube is those very often super rich arseholes, lovely people, compersion, super rich people who take themselves off to these amazing Michelin, 3-star Michelin restaurants and eat these just like, the 28 course tasting menu and drinking the Grand Krug champagnes, and they proudly show the bill at the end. Oh, this cost me 7,000 euros with change. And I love watching those videos. I feel like this is like the poor man's version of this, right? Like, we're going through but of course, what you need, we've done like the first, I don't know, four courses of the 28 course tasting menu, is you actually do need to go and have a pee, and I do need to go and have a pee. But before I go and have a pee, maybe just I'm going to pretend to be Mark Will. I'm going to pretend that I can just quote this by off the top of my head, but I've just looked it up, and maybe this is about ultimately the kind of reader I am, and I know this is the kind of reader you are, and it feels like a good summation, right? Good old Franz. I'm going to read the whole one because very often people just quote that one line. But Kafka, if the book we are reading does not wake us, as with a fist hammering on our skulls, then why do we read it? Good God! We also would be happy if we had no books, and such books that make us happy we could, if need be, write ourselves. What we must have are those books that come on us like ill fortune, or good fortune, I would say, like the death of one we love better than ourselves, like suicide. A book must be an ice axe to break the sea frozen inside us. What we need are books that hit us, that like punch us, right? I mean, I feel like you're someone who's looking for that too. That's the ecstasy, that like smash us in the face, like a most painful misfortune, like the death of someone we loved more than we love ourselves, that make us feel as though we had been banished to the woods, far from any human presence, like a suicide. It's interesting he mentions suicide quite a bit, doesn't he? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. I mean, that's beautiful, right?
That's the quote that Bowie appropriates in Ashes to Ashes. Want an axe to break the ice. Yeah. Oh, we got to
you
put
can
that in
talk
the
to
show
that.
notes.
Well, you can actually talk to that. Talk to our one devoted follower of the live stream. While I just go and have a quick pee, if you excuse me, 1 moment.
Well, I'll take a quick break myself.
Okay, cool.
We'll be right back.
I think I'm gonna have to line up some snacks here. That was the throat clearing, right? That was the throat clearing part. I'm gonna need snacks. These are quite nice. Nairns, fruit and seed oat cakes. They're all healthy. They're all super healthy. They're guilt free. Those are the kind of snacks I like. It's too much guilt. We have too much guilt already. I do. So you want guilt-free snacks. And then these are made by the magnificent Aldi. They are biscuits, cookies, you would say, Mark. But these are their breakfast biscuits, which means there's less sugar. They're basically for people to dunk into their coffee. Or tea, for that matter. Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted.
No, it's all good. I was just delivering my little snack, my snack spiel. Okay.
Snack spiel.
Well, if
I was looking for my
the throat clearing part of this, because we're going to go into Brigit. Yeah, we're going to actually move into the next slide. Yeah.
Oh yes. And hold on.
Si ella me mata no voy pa' algún lado. Te voy a comer aunque sea gula. Ese culo es imposible disimular. Voy a abrir la caja bomboné. Ella lo prendió y me puso a volar. La noche como vos es espectacular. Ya no importa dónde, no importa el lugar. Y no voy a usarlo con dónde.
Yeah. Okay. So we changed slides, people. The intro lasted about an hour. So
About an hour.
now we're we didn't start till 40 minutes after the stream began. So yeah, it was about an hour for the intro. So now we're into the actual text that the idiot read in 2024. I was looking for my Calasso book and I can't find it, and so I'm distracted by that, but I'll try to focus. So I like how you organized your reading according to genre. And the first genre that we're going to look at is what you call ecstatic poetry. There were several collections that you read this year, and you have chosen to focus on this collection called Song by this poet that you'll tell us about.
Brigit Pegeen Kelly. Yeah. Is she someone who's ever been on your radar? Have you, until I sent you this poem that I'm going to also kick us off with? Have you read it? Have you?
I don't know. I don't think I've heard of her, but as soon as I saw the cover and read about a goat's head, I was immediately drawn to it because, of course, I'm in the process of completing my novel, Goat Songs. So we got Song, Goat's Head. Wow. I mean, very relevant, relevant to what I'm doing. So tell us about.
She then I think would be super worth reading. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to give a huge amount of spiel about Brigit because I wanted to read, although I was thinking about this morning, kind of doing a bit of prep for this, and I was thinking, am I really going to read the whole of Song or just the first part? But I really would like to read it if you're up for that, because it's probably going to take about 2.5 minutes because it's a longish poem, but I feel like in a way it's such a great intro into her work, and it's also really in some way an encapsulation of I suppose everything that she stands for as an artist and as a poet and her whole aesthetic. But I suppose to give why I chose her was at the beginning of last year. So this time last year, I guess, I was still in the midst of what I call my kind of sackcloth and ashes, substance abuse, midlife crisis stint, which was precipitated by somebody dumping me at the end of 2021 and me going into full tilt drama queen, kind of, woe is meism. Like properly for 3 years of just sort of crawling around, feeling sorry for myself, and making probably quite a number of feeling sorry for myself kind of podcasts. And at the beginning of last year, I fell in love. I mean, she'd always been on my radar, but I really, really fell hard for Brigit Pegeen Kelly and these 3 collections. A Song, I think, is her third last. I can't remember. And what I really fell for, because I stumbled into our tryst by thinking I'd really love to hear her reading this poem, and so I went in search of poetry readings. So she's a writer from the kind of late 20th century. I can't remember. I should have looked this up, but I can't remember when she died. I think she died in the early aughts. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I could find some stuff? And there was very little, but I did track down. I was very excited to track down 3 or 4 readings that had been recorded and can be found on that amazing repository, the Internet Archive, where you can find some 80s and 90s readings by her. And I so fell in love with these readings, also because she reads her own work, but she's as likely to read other people as well. It's like she does these like cover versions, I guess. It's like, it's like, someone doing on stage, and the work she chooses to cover is also then reflects back and kind of enters into dialogue with her own work. And so I went on a bit of a journey with her, and the journey was, I thought, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read myself aloud and record for my Poetry Koan podcast, because I have this podcast called Poetry Koan. I'm going to record aloud all three of those books, because it was a search for ecstasy. I thought if I can read them aloud, all of these poems, I can somehow take them into myself. I can kind of live them. And the idea was to read them in sequence, and then also where I had actually her reading, I would then also have her reading rather than me. So it was a way of kind of like me reading and her reading, but having like the complete works, because I thought also be a lovely thing, because she is really renowned by those, you know, who are into late 20th century poetry, I guess. She's really, really a renowned writer, and I thought people would enjoy that and appreciate that in some way. And so that's what kind of got me. I was, you know, very, very deeply into Brigit Pegeen Kelly for about a month, and I would get up every day and I would read these poems aloud and listen to her readings, and I made, maybe we can put it in the links, a couple of episodes of Poetry Koan, which were also me writing about some of these poems, and also writing about some of her cover version poems. And yeah, I mean, that's the long and the short of it, because it also allowed me, I think, at that time to, I wanted to get out of my own head, and poetry, well, reading can do that, but poetry can do that in a very, poetry again, you know, can be like music in that sense, right? It's sort of like like great songs that you love, that for that 3.5 minutes you don't exist as a self. You are out of the ego cage. You are just simply transported, right? Transported. That's what I'm looking for in everything that I read, or that I love, in terms of a reading experience. I just want to be transported. I don't want to be the idiot reading. I just want to be there. I want to be in that song.
Well, that's what ecstasy is, right? It's literally, etymologically, standing outside
Absolutely,
of oneself.
Yeah.
Now, for those that don't know, Ms. Kelly was actually an American poet and teacher. She was born in 1951 and died in 2016. So this collection, Song Poems, was apparently published in 1995. So go ahead and let's hear your recitation.
Yeah. You know, before I read it, I was also, because I sort of thought, well, we'd start with this, right? I didn't realize we'd be like an hour in. And I was going to sort of say, well, I'm sure you know this, that and you know, now that I make YouTube videos, I know this very well, because I can actually look at the data in terms of how videos are watched, and you know, it's interesting, isn't it? And well, most YouTube videos, not just mine, people, it can be quite. It can be a real. Yeah, it's good. Good for the ego, right? A real kind of slap about the chops for the ego, because even if you get, like, let's say, like last year, I did a video which got 3,000 views. I mean, most of my videos get like 5 views or 3 views or 50 views, but this one got 3,000 views, and it was mainly because I was riding off the back of a cultural phenomenon at the time, this Tiny Desk concert of these two mad Argentinian rockers, Paco Amoroso and Catriel, and which got 20 million views. And so, you know, I made this silly little video. I literally did it in a day, and suddenly get 3,000 views. But even on my 3,000 view, like, hallelujah, I finally made it on YouTube. I look at that, and it's only 10 minutes long, and like 95% of those views, they clicked away after a minute and a half.
Yeah,
so I was gonna say to you, like, okay, well, fuck it, let's just really go for it. Like, let's actually read a 3.5 minute poem or a 3 minute poem. And because those people, they'll click away after the first line anyway, and that's fine. And we're just left with, Tomek, Madeline, Rob. I'm trying to think of the people I know who will possibly watch to the end of the video that I make. Those people. But I think that's maybe, I don't know what you think as a content creator. I'm almost starting to embrace that. I'm starting to be like, yeah, that's what it's about. That's what I'm not making content for the ADHD average standard lovely YouTube watcher, because they mean nothing to me and I mean nothing to them. I'm making it for, I don't know, I'm making it for those crazy people who, for some reason, actually want to sit and listen to. I mean, I'm speaking to somebody who has made like what was the longest texting you did last year? Was it like 4 hours or something?
Probably something like that. Yeah, maybe one of those one of those T.S. Eliot episodes. I mean,
yeah. I mean,
whatever. I just
I
see it.
only made it through about 2 hours of that. I still haven't finished that.
I was probably asleep through half of it, so no need to apologize.
It was genuinely all good.
Well, I don't try to place a value judgment on it. It's like a task that I have to complete, and so I'm just going to do it, and then I put it out there, and then it sinks or swims. It's
is it a task or is it a pleasure? Because again,
well,
I mean, with you and Tomek,
for me, it's
like
for me, it's
two buddies at the pub having like this really long-winding. I was going to say long-winded, but maybe both,
sure.
Right? Long-winded conversation. But those are the best conversations, and also I think we have a hunger, us lonely. We're all kind of lonely, existentially. What's the word? Cut off, I guess, in this crazy virtual world of ours. That's also the thing we're all hungering for. That's why people will sit and listen to a 4-hour Rogan or something, right? Because we want that. We want that experience.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it depends, because maybe there's some conversations at the pub that you don't want to listen in on for 4 hours, and maybe there are others that you do want to listen in on for 4 hours or more. So I don't have an answer for it. Again, for me, it's just something that I know I'm going to do, and so I just do it, and we go until we're finished. Yes, it's pleasurable, but it's also a kind of duty. Like we can't just stop before we're done. We have to be comprehensive and cover all the content and whatever. I can always clip it.
There is content and content, right? Because maybe I'm just narcissistic, and maybe we're both just narcissistic enough to believe that actually what we are trying to do here is bring the best of ourselves. And you might not want the best of ourselves, but we are trying to bring the best of ourselves to this content, right? And I would like to believe that, okay, if you went on a hike with us, it's not like we're just sort of sitting here gossiping about, I don't know, Taylor Swift's pantyhose or something, right? Which I mean, some people will sit and listen to hours of that too.
Oh yeah, probably more so than what we're talking about, but yeah,
we're trying.
Obviously, we feel that there's some value or insight in what we're presenting, but maybe it takes us longer to get there than some people have the patience to endure. But that's, again, I don't see that as my concern or a problem. Like that's the beauty of clips. You pick out the highlights and shorts, which I'm now.
Oh, you're shortastic at the moment. My feed is currently just like flooded with your shorts. It's like short.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's great. It's great.
Well,
because
I mean this is because of the platform
most of the other shorts are like sort of I don't know, 18-year-old women just sort of like wobbling their boobs around, and that's all you need to really do if you're an 18-year-old. Just wobble your boobs around, and us middle-aged men are just sort of sitting there mesmerized like that, right?
Right.
I don't know why that's in there. It's not like I'm necessarily looking for that, but yeah. Whereas at least your shorts, hey, I actually might get a little tidbit of information.
Well, it's nothing to do with me. It's not like my own innovation. It just happens to be that the platform I use generates these shorts with the help of, you guessed it, AI. And so I can go in and edit, because of course if you just go with the draft that AI produces, it's garbage. So it does take quite a bit of work to edit, especially the text, and then also the video sometimes too. So whatever, it's just an experiment. But yeah, it has gotten some attention from random people who wouldn't otherwise necessarily follow the Mark Will Write YouTube channel. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of it got some attention from devout Christians who found my comments on the Bible blasphemous when we were talking about pilgrimizing. So
cool.
Yeah, it's good.
That's like nectar to the Enneagram 8 challenges.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's like fuel for the machine, isn't it? It's like, I've managed to piss a few people off. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Morris is about, right? Well, anyway, we won't talk about Morrissey now. I'm sure we'll get to him. But
one guy said, now you need to repent and serve Jesus. And so I replied to him, judge not, lest ye be judged. And then he replies to me, preaching is not judging, son. And so I replied to him, forgive me, Father. And that was the end of the exchange. Yeah, I mean, it was nice. It was pretty respectful overall. And then another guy sent me like he didn't even send the clip. He just said like a Serbian chant victory song, and it's based on the book of Revelation. And I said, oh, thanks for making me aware of this beautiful, sublime piece of music. So yeah, some interesting exchanges there. But anyway,
right. Let's do it. Ecstatic poetry. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is song by Brigit Pegeen Kelly.
You couldn't get a more Irish name than that.
Indeed, even though she was born in Palo Alto. Okay, listen. There was a goat's head hanging by ropes in a tree. All night it hung there and sang. And those who heard it felt a hurt in their hearts and thought they were hearing the song of a night bird. They sat up in their beds and then they lay back down again. In the night wind, the goat's head swayed back and forth, and from far off it shone faintly, the way the moonlight shone on the train track miles away, beside which the goat's headless body lay. Some boys had hacked its head off. It was harder work than they had imagined. The goat cried like a man and struggled hard. But they finished the job. They hung the bleeding head by the school and then ran off into the darkness that seems to hide everything. The head hung in the tree. The body lay by the tracks. The head called to the body to the head. They missed each other. The missing grew large between them until it pulled the heart right out of the body, until the drawn heart flew toward the head, flew as a bird flies back to its cage and the familiar perch from which it trills. Then the heart sang in the head, softly at first and then louder, sang long and low until the morning light came up over the school and over the tree, and then the singing stopped. The goat had belonged to a small girl She named the goat Broken Thorn Sweet Blackberry, named it after the night's bush of stars, because the goat's silky hair was dark as well water, because it had eyes like wild fruit. The girl lived near a high railroad track. At night she heard the trains passing, the sweet sound of the train's horn pouring softly over her bed, and each morning she woke to give the bleating goat his pail of warm milk. She sang him songs about girls with ropes and cooks in boats. She brushed him with a stiff brush. She dreamed daily that he grew bigger, and he did. She thought her dreaming made it so. But one night the girl didn't hear the train's horn, and the next morning she woke to an empty yard. The goat was gone. Everything looked strange. It was as if a storm had passed through while she slept, wind and stones, rain stripping the branches of fruit. She knew that someone had stolen the goat and that he had come to harm. She called to him all morning, and into the afternoon she called and called. She walked and walked. In her chest, a bad feeling, like the feeling of the stones gouging the soft undersides of her bare feet. Then somebody found the goat's body by the high tracks, the flies already filling their soft bottles at the goat's torn neck. Then somebody found the head hanging in a tree by the school. They hurried to take these things away so that the girl would not see them. They hurried to raise money to buy the girl another goat. They hurried to find the boys who had done this, to hear them say, "It was a joke, it was nothing but a joke." But listen, here is the point. The boys thought to have their fun and be done with it. It was harder work than they had imagined, this silly sacrifice, but they finished the job, whistling as they washed their large hands in the dark. What they didn't know was that the goat's head was already singing behind them in the tree. What they didn't know was that the goat's head would go on singing, just for them, long after the ropes were down, and that they would learn to listen, pail after pail, stroke after patient stroke. They would wake in the night thinking they heard the wind in the trees or a night bird, but their hearts beating harder. There would be a whistle, a hum, a high murmur, and at last a song. The low song a lost boy sings, remembering his mother's call. Not a cruel song, no, not cruel at all. This song is sweet. It is sweet. The heart dies of this sweetness.
Well read.
Whew, that gets me every time. You know, that is that axe. You know, as soon as you get to the part about her raising this goat, and you know, this goat being like her child, and I just want to start bawling. I really fucking do. It you know, and that's what you want to feel, and you don't always get that from poetry. In fact, very little, which is why I think ecstatic poetry is very often not what most poems are. Most poetry is just like meh. I think 99% of the poems I read are a bit like meh. But when you get that one poem that breaks the ice, the ice within. Wow.
Well, it's literally tragic poetry too, you know.
Yeah.
The of course I'm thinking about this because I'm writing this novel called Goat Songs, right? But the etymology of tragedy, you know what it is? Literally goat song. Goat song.
Wow.
That is what it means. So yeah, and the reason for that is because, well, there are different theories. One is that the winner of the Greek tragic competition, you know, like they would have a Dionysian festival, and playwrights, tragedians would compete with one another to see who would write the best or most acclaimed tragedy, and the winner would receive a goat. So tragedy is the goat song, right? There are other theories,
Crazy. I don't
maybe.
think I ever knew that. And here is somebody who studied literature at university, like, whoa.
Well, some people say, some of the first tragic actors wore goat skins. That was part of their costume. But I think the most plausible theory is that the winner of the competition would receive a goat. So anyway, that is what it means. Tragedy is goat song. And then, of course, it also reminds us of the biblical scapegoat. The poor goat is sacrificed, as the poem says. I don't know if it's for the sins of the community or the sins of these three fucking hooligans that take this poor girl's pet that's like a child. But yeah, the reaction for me is not so much ecstatic as like a kick in the balls, which is, maybe the same thing, right? Like the physical, I guess I feel it more in the gut than in the nutsack, but, like the physical sensation one gets hearing the recitation is undeniable and I guess conducive to a kind of ecstasy, It's like it takes... Or catharsis. Maybe it's cathartic poetry. Catharsis is, of course, an aspect of tragedy that Aristotle identifies. We there's a purging. We see the horrific played out on the stage, or in this case, on the page, or in across the airwaves as you're reading it to us. So we experience a kind of cathartic reaction.
Yeah. It's a very deeply melancholic, and I would even go so far as to say, kind of a tortured, as Christ was on the cross, a tortured ecstasy. And it is, and maybe it's only, poetry can reach for that, but maybe only in song. Again, that's why both of us are great Morrissey lovers, because there's something about Morrissey's voice, right? Something he does that's kind of like, there's something when Morrissey's really in his full Enneagram 4, dark, tortured, self-pity, it wouldn't last, whatever. It's another kind of person who comes to mind, or even a title of a song, is this Elvis Costello song called Useless Beauty. Not a great album, but a great song. And I feel like this poem, as all great ecstatic poetry and tragic poetry is it captures the brutal, terrible, awful, and yet beautiful, ecstatic beauty of of life in general, nature, red and tooth and claw, but also of the human animal who is, we are all ultimately centaurs, aren't we? We've got that searching, ecstasy-seeking, transcendent thing going on, but also we are brutal motherfuckers. I don't know why that when I read it recently, that line about their large hands. I wonder why. I wonder what that really stuck out for me. Like they're washing their large hands, but these are children. What is it that feels very pertinent somehow? That feels key to me. That line. What do you make of that line? Why are
brutish?
Large?
They're clumsy and brutish and violent. Like most. How do we commit violence? It's usually with our hands, our large hands, right?
Yeah.
The hands of some mothers are bigger than others. Those of us with the bigger hands, the larger hands, are the more likely to be violent and to take advantage of the weak. The weak in this scenario being the poor little girl, right? Like compared, maybe it's from her perspective, compared to her tiny hands, these boys must have, gargantuan
I think they've actually
hands.
got quite small hands, but I think in the act of doing what they did, they are no longer children. They are now, and they will of course also then be by society be judged in
As
a way
adults, yeah.
as adults. Because the other thing that comes up for me, and very interestingly, was actually occurring when she was writing this, although who knows if she was aware of this, right? Because, I mean, this book came out in 1995, but I imagine this poem was written in the early 90s. And I don't know if this is something you were aware of. I mean, but of course, if you're British or British adjacent, as I am, this is a key part of late 20th century British history, and that is the Jamie Bulger case. Do you know about Jamie Bulger?
No, I don't.
So in February, 12th of February 1993 in Merseyside, right, these two 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables, they essentially abducted and then led away. They abducted is maybe too strong a word for it. They found this little boy who was out shopping with his mum, and they drew him away from her, and they led him away to these train tracks, and then they tortured and murdered him, this 2-year-old little boy. And understandably, even though they were 10 years old, they were essentially put away for life. Although recently, if you could, you look online, one of them, I can't remember who, is now out for good
rehabilitated
behavior. Yeah. And understandably, that then prompted a little bit of a kind of like, right, we've got to find this motherfucker and kill him. Even though he of course has they've given him a whole new identity and probably even et cetera. Blake Morrison wrote a really fantastic book about this called As If, because he went to the trial of these two boys at the time, and and the book is grappling with like how can two and as you can imagine those two 10-year-olds had suffered all sorts of terrible abuses themselves, and all sorts of socioeconomic deprivation, and again there that's the terrain I think that Brigit Pegeen Kelly is often in, that you can't really take a moral line with any of this, because it's almost like just nature, red in tooth and claw, working itself out in terribly perverse and horrific ways at times.
Yeah, well, you alluded to the Tennyson line. I'm also thinking of the Hawthorne line from Young Goodman Brown. And I did have to look this up, so this is not off the top of my head. The fiend in his own shape is less hideous than when he rages in the breast of man.
Yeah.
So, like, it really takes the human to incarnate evil. There's evil as an abstract concept, but when that evil is played out in the human drama, it's more horrific than like the worst thing that nature can do. Like this is more horrible than a hurricane or a wildfire, to take the recent example that's in the news,
because that human side of us knows what we are doing, right? It's that kind of like that Lady again, that the large hands made me think of Lady Macbeth, when she's washing her hands and she can't get the blood, off them. Yeah. That act was, the sort of the killing occurred in a very kind of primate fashion, a very sort of, we are primates, very hierarchical, very kind of power structured in a way, but the human side of us understands, that's a bit of a no-no there. That's a bit of a no-no, Lady Macbeth. A little bit naughty there, Lady Macbeth, right? And no other animal has that capacity to know that, you probably shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean,
I feel like that's almost all we need to say about that poem. And
there's really, I'm speechless in a way, other than, throwing out these academic gut reactions, but it's just it's physical. Like there's a physical reaction I have to it. It's kind of one of repulsion, but also a strange fascination. For me, it's maybe more cathartic than ecstatic, but I can certainly see how you would consider it an ecstatic poem as well. And I'm just, just all the associations with the goat, like in my book, Goat Songs, that hopefully I'll finish this year. The goat plays the same role as the whale does in Moby Dick, like every aspect of the goat is examined in some way.
Have you, if this doesn't sound too sort of a banal a question to follow that, have you hung out with many a goat in your time?
Well, as a matter of fact, I mean, after I conceived this book, I did kind of seek them out. Like, if I'm at the zoo or whatever, it's been a while since I've made such a visit, but like when my sons were younger and I took them to the zoo, I'd seek out the goats. And I don't know, I think I was at a petting zoo in Japan one time and they had goats there, so yeah, for sure. Like that, they're. I'm not even a Capricorn.
If you're right about goats, you would surely need to, because I know that Brigit Pegeen Kelly, she lived a very rural sort of life, and so everything she writes about, right? She had actual lived experience of. This is her terrain. It's not just an imaginative terrain. This is her world.
Absolutely, yeah. So, even though, as I was saying, even though I'm not a Capricorn, I tend to feel a kind of association with that animal, just as being a pig, according to and I guess as it turns out, you're a pig as well, according to the Chinese.
We're both pigs.
Well, you said you're 53. You said you're 53. That means we are literally 5 or 6 days apart.
Wow, I didn't realize we were the same age. I thought you were younger than me for some reason. I don't know why.
1971, baby.
Wow. How old is Tomek?
I mean, 30-something, 40, I don't know.
Younger, yeah.
Much younger, yeah. No, I think he's 40 by now.
Okay.
I mean, you like in our chat earlier, you were referring to a song from 1984, and I was thinking, was Tomek even born then? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's move on.
Let's move on.
It's almost, I feel almost disrespectful to pass over this, but in the interest of time, maybe we should continue.
But also,
it's like we should have a prolonged moment of silence.
I don't know, self-promotion here, right? I mean, I even though they're pretty dark, my 3 poetry koan episodes on Brigit Pegeen Kelly, I think are, I think they'll give you if they'll give you a good run for your money there, but so worth reading. Because poetry can be I think of all our various literary forms, I don't know how you feel, but I feel it can be so kind of hit and miss, really. And
A lot of garbage. Yeah, a lot of garbage out
but
there.
to find someone, I think to actually have a collection where every poem, certainly in this one, is stunning, breathtaking, is quite a feat. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll put those in the show notes. The Poetry Con episode.
Nos usamos de bloqueador. Cuando ella baila, se le ve debajo esa minifalda. Quiero ver que rebote. Bum, 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 bye. Bum, 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 y rompe. Bum, 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 bye. Hoy te voy a hacer llorar.
All right. That leads us to ecstatic biography. So another genre you focused on in 2024 was biography, and in particular you seem to have become obsessed with the life of Gertrude Stein, and I'm just wondering why. I mean, I read long ago her autobiography of her curiously titled Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, just as kind of like obligatory reading into the whole Hemingway milieu in Paris and so on. I guess it was probably like supplemental to my Hemingway reading. Was never like, I tried to read her, what was it? The Americans, or one of those other books with a rose is a rose is a rose, and I just could not get into it. So tell us, what is it about Gertrude Stein that so fascinates you?
Well, as that one person is still watching now. Hey, Rob. I just talk about my friend Rob only because I don't know. He's like a completist like you, right? He's like, okay, I've committed to this. I'm going to watch these motherfuckers until the end, even if they're going to do the, even if they're going to talk for like 3 days here, we'll get there, and that's also why I love him, and respect him. It's good to have someone like that on your side. So as you will no doubt start to tell, there is a real thread here. I didn't realize there was as much of a thread, but there really is a thread here because I was in full essay mode, self-annihilating, substance abusing mode, etc. Also, by the way, those two pictures are ChatGPT. I said, "Can you?" This is the prompt. Can you produce for me a portrait of Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, made out of cannabis leaves? And you'll see why I needed that. And it first of all came up with this garbage because it gave like the sort of the sexy version, the sort of the girls in their bikinis with the jiggling bits. And I was like, no, not that. Get your kid out of the gutter, GPT, you filthy beast. No, show me the ones I like, which are the sort of the older ladies. But essentially, so two things. Because I was in this whole like woe is me, hostage to fortune, etc. mode, I have for the last three years refused to watch or read anything about anything about heterosexual relationships, essentially, because I don't want. Again, I'm an envious, embittered fool. I don't want. Unless it's disastrous, I'll do that. But I don't want. I haven't watched any films where people are, having fun and having, in a romantic relationship of some sort, because I didn't want to have my nose, shoved into that shit. So, but I have no problem. I can really feel, compersion. I can feel great joy for. LGBTQ plus folk getting their rocks off and having great relationships. So I've read more of LGBTQ broadly speaking literature, if you like. than ever before, for that very narcissistic not wanting to cause myself pain. So it was partly that, but also every summer I grow some cannabis out in my greenhouse. And the way I do it is that I also, because I don't grow that many plants, I don't need that much, even when I'm substance abusing. There I am. There's Gertrude and Alice. And what I do is I'll usually name them. They get named every year, and and they're all lesbian plants because cannabis plants are all females. The flowering varieties are all females, and so I was like, okay, well, who's it going to be?
Yeah.
And I thought, Gertrude Stein, and then because I was doing that, that's actually where it started. I mean, I wish I could say it was like for literary purposes, but it started. I was thinking, I haven't really read much about Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, but they've always been on my radar. I mean, in terms of Stein, I know one quote is that famous quote about Oakland, there's no there, right? Which I've always loved, and repurposed in lots of different ways. It's a great quote. And then, in my, pretentious, I was going to say my pretentious younger days, but of course, I continue to be so. But in my pretentious younger days, I would walk around, with a copy of Tender Buttons under my arm, thinking that someone's going to find that incredibly attractive and sexy because it is a sexy book. I think Tender Buttons is a very sexy book, and it sort of sends out the vibes that I would want somebody who wants to cop off with me would be like, oh, you've got a copy of Tender Buttons. Oh, let me take my clothes off. That would be the fantasy there. But other than that, haven't really read much of hers because I find Gertrude Stein's prose by and large laborious, repetitive, and kind of boring. But anyway, so I went and then read the biographies, and I just fell in love with their stories. And I made a whole bunch of videos actually on my channel last year about them. I mean about the plants, but also about them. And of course, these videos went down like lead balloons. I was like, come on, everyone's going to love this, right? But of course not, for two reasons. First of all, I mean, the lesbian factor, that probably gets them like 1 point. But they're unfortunately, well, both dead, but not, and white. And also, unfortunately, not a great look in 2024. They're both Jews. Even though Gertrude, right, even though she was a Jew, I think she gets extra points, but people don't know this. I think she gets extra points because she was one of those Jews, because she's an 8, one of those brutal motherfucker Jews who says things like, I think Hitler, and she meant it in a way, I think Hitler should be given the Nobel Peace Prize, right? Because I'm not entirely sure what she said that, but maybe, like the brutal motherfucker would say, yeah, because, there's too many of these pompous Jews around. Let's knock some of them, not knock some of them off. I mean, she was brutal, Gertrude Stein, and I really love that about her. She's a tough cookie. And I just fell in love with their story. With her story going off to Paris, her and her brother Leo, and they start to buy, they start to buy the avant-garde artists of the time,
right,
for a pittance, and start, trading in art. Alice B. Toklas writes that the Alice B. Toklas cookbook mainly actually at the end of her life to make money. People didn't realize this. It was because after Gertrude died, the money-grabbing Jews that we are, Jews that the Steins were, really fucked her over, and she, they froze her out of the estate, and she desperately needed to make money. And so the book that she's really known for, which is the Alice B. Toklas cookbook,
yes,
was made for her to make some money. And I fell in love with their story and their love affair. And in fact, I made a video, which I'm going to put a link to, where I try and pitch their story to Greta Gerwig, because I had this idea that this is the perfect post-Barbie follow-up for Greta. I don't know why anyone, well, maybe because they're like, white Jews, but I don't know why anyone hasn't done yet, like the biopic, because I think it's amazing. It's got everything. It's got, it's got Picasso, it's got Hemingway. I mean, it's just incredible. And I think it would be a great, like, Greta Gerwig. This is my second attempt at doing it, doing the pitch. I think it would make a great Greta Gerwig, someone like that, vehicle. But I don't, it's not going to happen now. But that's the long and the short of it, essentially. The funny thing is, though, that there is a recipe. Where is I've got the book somewhere, but I'm not going to stand up because my bottom half is not as cool as my top half. Oh no, I have it here. There is a recipe in the Alice B. Toklas cookbook for, I think it's for hash brownies. But
exactly.
But the funny thing is, here's the really funny thing, which not many people know, and it doesn't even seem, I don't know, I when I was like reading about it, it doesn't even seem like the internet knows, that if you were to follow this recipe, you would not get high. Because I know I have made hash brownies from my own gear, not hash brownies, I've made, cannabis brownies from my own gear, and if you do not, what's it called? Decarboxylate, whatever it is, your weed, if you do not put it in, your oven, in your mason jars, and there's a whole process, right? And heat it all up and da-da-da-da-da. And in the recipe, it's just like, take some marijuana and throw it in with some eggs and some... If you were to do that, nothing would come of it, proving, which was the case, that although they ate these brownies, she never made them, and they were obviously made by somebody else, because if you follow the recipe, you would not get off your tits on Alice B. Toklas's hash brownies. Sorry.
Well, how about the other recipes in there? Anything worth recommending?
A lot of them are quite meat heavy. So because I'm not a meat eater, I did have this plan, one of my many plans which never came to fruition was to make a whole bunch of them, try and kind of like vegetarianize or veganize them, but it never ever happened. But she was a really, really great cook, purportedly, Toklas, and that was some of the pleasures, of going and visiting them, that she would go into the kitchen and just rustle up these feasts, and was... Yeah.
I had forgotten about Tender Buttons, which I may have actually read. Anyway, that's a fantastic title.
Yes.
With its double entendre.
Tatuaje en el cuello, sí. El pelo negro, sí. De silicona, sí. Se vieron anoche, sí. We've been fucking dancing, girl. Tú por la noche, yo por el día.
Let's move on to the next genre, which is philosophy and mysticism. And as I mentioned in one of our chats, I commend you for elevating mysticism to this status of being like a genre worthy of reading multiple books on. Philosophy, oh yes, that's respectable, right? But mysticism, and I assume like the occult and esoteric wisdom, like that's one of my reading interests too. So I was really glad to see that this was a category which you deemed worthy of consideration and inclusion in your best of list.
Yeah, but only, I think, also if the writing is, of a high quality, or
Sure.
right, that it's, because again, I think yeah, you go into the book, you go into that section of the bookshop, and there is a lot of kind of fairly dull, new agey sort of so what tomes around in that category. But the great classics, of mysticism, The Cloud of Unknowing, and I mean they are really great classics in that genre, which stand up to any other form of literature, right? I mean, they're poetic. They're as much poetry. I think that's where mysticism and poetry meet. Another podcast I used to do was a reading. I would sit with a friend of mine, and we would read. I don't know if you've ever read "I Am That," Sri Nisargadatta's "I Am That." Have you ever come across that book?
I have. Yeah, I know it's based on that line from the Upanishads, and I think I've read excerpts from that.
Yeah, and but it was these conversations that he would have, right, with this group, but there's so much, which was not the case for the person I did it with. He was really, really into the actual spiritual, I guess, side of that, which I have some interest too. But for me, it was actually more about the poetry, it's about the ecstasy of some of those lines. And the metaphors that he uses, that I found particularly pungent there. But that's not necessarily what Ouspensky and Critchley are about, I guess. Have you read In Search of the Miraculous?
No, I haven't, and maybe you can give us some background on Ouspensky and Gurdjieff. I know they were associates. Maybe Ouspensky was Gurdjieff's student, or
that's right.
What's their relationship? I know a little bit about Gurdjieff and have read like a little bit of what is his famous trilogy. There's Meetings with Remarkable Men. There's Beelzebub and his nephew, is it? Grandfather.
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah.
So, but not like I haven't read all of his works by any means, or even like one of them in its entirety. We'll talk more about Gurdjieff, I'm sure, in our texting episode on the Enneagram, but just tell us about this work by Ouspensky, and maybe you can discuss his relationship with Gurdjieff and why you chose to read it, what you got out of it. Just take it wherever you want.
Sure. Well, again, my route into this, it was very much through the Enneagram, in the sense that even though Gurdjieff doesn't really talk much about this, although he does, interestingly, in his movements, which I'll mention in a moment, because I went and did these movement classes last year, which was a key part of his teachings. There is actually a series of movements called the Enneagram, but a lot of the kind of the sort of, I don't know, the sort of mystical psychospiritual roots of the Enneagram some of it comes from Gurdjieff, like the law of three. What is the law of three? Affirming, denying, and neutralizing. I mean, it's it's like that dialectical
Hegelian.
Yeah, this sort of it's that kind of Hegelian process. But yeah, Gurdjieff was how to describe who Gurdjieff was. I mean, my sense of I'm not really much of a Gurdjieff fan. My sense of Gurdjieff is that he was a kind of a magician. He was a kind of a bullshitter. He was a kind of he was a sort of a chancer, a guru who went on all of these so-called travels. Who knows how much of it he actually did? Went to these travels, met all of these wise men, and then synthesized that into his own shtick. and because he was an 8, he was looking for and needing also to feel powerful and strong, needing acolytes, and everyone who and he found a whole bunch of them, including Ouspensky, and a lot of his acolytes were Enneagram 6 types who were looking for people who say, I know what it's all about. And of course Gurdjieff would say one of his primary pieces of teaching was like, when you find your master, I mean, all gurus say this, right? When you think you found your master, you must do everything your master tells you to do. You must not question, you must not, right? Now, and a lot of people would say, but there are some people in this world, as we know, who that's music to their ears. Like, oh my God, finally, I can just do this. And those were the people who kind of, if you read the In Search of the Miraculous, and then also if you read, shout out to this book, which I read as well, this biography written by Gary Lachman called In Search of P.D. Ouspensky. Gary Lachman was the guitarist of Blondie. Another classic 80s band, 90s band. But then has had a career, a much longer career than he had as a guitarist for Blondie, writing a whole series of incredible books on the occult and the esoteric. I mean, a fantastic writer, very serious scholar. Yeah, amazing guy. Gary Lachman, and this is a fantastic book on Ouspensky, because Ouspensky started in that way with, and this is also what In Search of the Miraculous I think is about, right? It's about Ouspensky's kind of falling in love with Gurdjieff's teachings and the path that he set out, and then also falling out of love with that and going on to do his own thing, and what that involved was he spent some time in the 20s living in the UK and living in this place called Colette House, which has one of those blue plaque things outside. I'll find a picture. P.D. Ouspensky lived here, and he would do, amongst other things, these movement classes in the 1920s. And I discovered that these were still going on in the 2020s, and went and did them. And I also discovered that all the people who'd been there in the 1920s were still there in the 2020s, because the average age in this class was about 75 or 80. And it was an amazing experience in the sense of you would go and you would do these movements, which, as taught by Gurdjieff, and then sort of refined, I suppose, in some way by Ouspensky. They had a pianist who would actually play live, and it was very Gurdjieffian in the sense that when I said, "Oh, I'm enjoying this," I went and did a couple of classes, and I'm enjoying this. But I'd like to practice the moves. I like to get better at them. The line was, "No, you've got to," because I was like, but the whole point about this, right? Because this was the point of the movements, is that you get to do them to the point. They're quite complicated. The pieces of kind of like choreography, but you get to the point where you can do them without thinking. They kind of muscle memory. And
memory. Yeah,
exactly. Only then do you have the kind of, right, you're not in your head, you're not in your heart, you're actually in that gut place. You're in the Gurdjieff zone, and then you can have a mystical experience, whereas when you start to do the movement classes, you're totally in your head, because you're like, oh fuck, what do I do? I do this, and right. And then when I said, well, I want to actually experience that, I was pretty much told, well, you're going to have to probably come and do, movement classes for the next 5 years, because that's the whole point. The whole point is that you've got to suffer and struggle and be humiliated. I mean, they didn't put it in this way, but that was like the read between the lines. You've got to basically, be humiliated and really commit to this, be devoted to this, Otherwise, we can't help you.
No pain, no gain.
That's why I only did it for a couple of months, but it was an amazing experience. And
you mentioned a pianist there. Have you heard the Keith Jarrett tributes to Gurdjieff? Or I don't know. I guess it's like a cycle of pieces that he wrote in honor of Gurdjieff, or based on his, or inspired by his teachings. I'll put a link to that.
Yeah, I didn't know Jarrett had done this, but what the music that we would be doing these movements to was the music that Gurdjieff wrote with another one of his disciples, who was this Russian count, and they also had a lot of money. I mean, they all were patrons, right? I mean, Gurdjieff basically, again, he lived a nice life, was supported by his acolytes, Hartmann and his wife. And Hartmann was a composer and composed with Gurdjieff the music to all of these for all of these movements. And so I at the time I did listen to a lot of the Hartmann Gurdjieff pieces, but maybe Jarrett did a take on that. Perhaps did a take on Hartmann's work.
I'm not sure. I'll put a link in the show notes. I've probably listened to that whole album. Can't remember what it's called, but interesting. Yeah. Interesting that this, world famous jazz guy had this predilection for the teachings of Gurdjieff. How about Simon Critchley's On Mysticism? This cover art is also featured on certain editions of Georges Bataille's Eroticism, or sometimes it's translated Erotism, or On Eroticism, On Erotism. There's one edition of the text that features this same saint. Who is this? Saint...
It's Bernini's, it's the Bernini statue of... the blah blah of Saint Teresa,
Saint Teresa.
Yeah, it's that moment, it's the transfiguration or whatever of Saint Teresa,
apotheosis, or I don't know
exactly. Yeah. Which is in this church in Rome, because I used to, got a TEFL background, so I used to actually work just around the corner, and I would go and feast my eyes on this Bernini.
Oh wow.
Sculpture, which is just sitting there in a church. Anyone can go for free and look at it. This white alabaster marble, and it really is amazing because it's that crossover point, I think, between kind of sort of spirituality. Again, we're back to the centaur, the spirituality and porn. I mean, that face. I've seen that face in lots of paintings, but I've also seen that face in lots of porn videos. Right.
Hence the Bataille cover, right? The book is called Eroticism. So the mystical and the sexual, there's definitely a connection.
Yeah. And Critchley sort of talks about that. I mean, I just think he's a fabulous writer. He's written a book on David Bowie. What's your preferred pronunciation there?
Oh, really? Bowie is what I say. But you know where Bowie got his name, right? He's from a so-called hero. He's not a hero to me, but he's a state hero in Texas, right? He's a so-called hero of the Alamo. Jim Bowie. Bowie. The Bowie knife. The Bowie knife. Yeah, that's where he got his name. Oddly enough, but yeah, the Brits and he himself said Bowie. But yeah, in Texas, he's called Jim Bowie, and he's the inventor of the Bowie knife, which, he used to stab Mexicans at the Alamo, I guess. Whatever. That's some Lone Star hate mythological bullshit.
Yeah.
But wow,
Anyway,
I didn't
feel like
know
that
he
all-
wrote a. I read the what's the guy's name? I've got it on my shelf. I read another Bowie biography called Strange Fascination. Buckley is his name. What's his first name? Anyway, David Buckley, I believe his name is, and Bowie himself said garbage, nonsense. I found it informative, but wow, so this guy wrote a Bowie biography. I've got to read that for sure. Simon Critchley's Bowie bio. Put it in the notes. And this book itself looks good too, on mysticism. You're recommending it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Critchley, some of the, he's also got, I mean, Critchley, I think, sits in that lovely, for him and for us, that lovely sort of pocket of popular, but an academic. And I mean, he has his cake and eat it. He's got Shahida Barry on the back going, calling him the Messi of modern philosophy. That's a great quote. He's got, he's got Jonathan Lethem, saying Critchley is a figure of quite startling brilliance, and I can never guess what he'll do next, only that it is sure to sustain and nourish my appetite for his voice. Followed by Emily Wilson, the translator of, the sort of flavor of the month translator of the Odyssey, etc., going, there is something genuinely invigorating about Critchley's eager open-mindedness, his willingness to step back from modernity to the ancient world and from philosophy to literature. And it's all, I mean, it's not hype. I think he's a great writer. He's a philosopher, he teaches philosophy, but he brings heart and soul and, just a real flair, I think, to everything that he writes. So
I'm very interested in this and the Bowie bio. This goes on my Amazon wish list or whatever you want to call it. Maybe it's my Z. What's that site called? Z
Library.
There you go. Maybe it's on my Z Library wish list now. But yeah, that looks fantastic.
Yeah,
and maybe
and he does a great reading.
Ouspensky too.
I listen to him, and if you have a Spotify account, you can listen to him, of course, for free on Spotify. What you get 20 hours, I think, of audiobooks, right? A month. He reads it. He reads his own book on Spotify, and I think he's got a lovely. Again, his energy is really, really enjoyable to listen to. Yeah.
And the subtitle is The Experience of Ecstasy. There it is again.
Yeah.
With a little blurb from David Mitchell, the Dao De Jing translator. Is that right?
I thought this was
that's Stephen
getting
Mitchell.
Them mixed up. Yeah,
that's Stephen Mitchell. Sorry, I don't know David Mitchell.
Stephen Mitchell, husband of Byron Katie. That always whoa, I can't, those two. Well, maybe. Well, in fact, yeah. Byron Katie, Stephen Mitchell. That's a cool couple. I'd love to be at a dinner table with Byron Katie and Stephen Mitchell. No, it's David Mitchell of Cloud9. I'm sure you've come across him. I've read a bunch of his books, which, of course, because I'm such a non-retentive reader, I can't remember. But he's somebody. Recently, I've been thinking of rereading David Mitchell. What did I particularly? It's not the David Mitchell comedian, no. Although he's also great. Peep Show, David Mitchell. Have you ever watched Peep Show? Is that
yes. Oh yeah.
Jez and Mark and Jez. No, this is David Mitchell, the novelist, I believe.
Cloud Atlas, Number 9 Dream. Yes, okay, I know this guy. Yes.
I think particularly Cloud Atlas is fantastic. Yeah.
Number 9 Dream, not so much. I always thought I should read that as a Beatleologist, but maybe not.
I can't even remember if I've read that. I sort of read a few of his, and then and then our paths parted. But He's a great writer. So a thumbs up from him is a good thumbs up.
Okay. Tomek said, damn, you guys are still going? That was like 30 minutes ago. But
we're moving
yes,
towards
we
3
are.
hours. Let's see if we could kind of cap this at 3 hours. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, there's your.
There I am at Colette's house.
Doing the movements.
Doing some of the. I mean, the movements they're just so good, Jeff. It's it was just him because he was such a magpie. So he was like he saw a bunch of soldiers goose stepping down the road, and he was like, right, okay, brilliant. Well, and he incorporated that, and then some of them are actually quite. The ones I really, really most enjoyed were the ones where he built the movements out of kind of acts of, I suppose, craftspeople that he saw around him. So, for example, there's one the shoemaker, whatever it was called, movement, where it's literally you're doing all the movements for. Making a pair of shoes, you're stretching the leather over your thigh, and then you're, taking a nail, and then you're doing this, and the men are in one place and the women are in one place. It is truly fascinating. And if they were, I also thought, if they I felt like if they sort of brought it a little bit more into the 21st century, I could really see it taking off. They advertised this. I think they advertised it in Time Out or somewhere, because every week 2 or 3 people would show up, having seen the ad, probably in Time Out, and young people as well, like young people in their 30s, 40s, and they would stay just for one session because they would look around at all these 80-year-olds, and even though they kind of enjoyed it, they were just like, nah.
Yeah. All right, so the next genre is ecstatic and scientific fiction, and you've selected 2 books to represent this genre. We've got John Steinbeck's classic East of Eden, and we've got a more recent publication called Annie Bot. So tell us what you will about these works.
So again, all of these books, as you could see, in fact, most of these books, right, come out of just my own little personal obsession. So why did I read Steinbeck's East of Eden? I read Steinbeck's East of Eden because Drew Newkirk, who is a psychotherapist who works in New York and has a channel on the Enneagram, and he's also a sexual 4, so he is my type, although he's got better tats. Well, he's got tats. I don't have any tats. He's got the tats, and he's a sexual 4 with a 3 wing, so he looks much more kind of bling than I do, but envy, resentment. But anyway, he's a sexual 4, and I love him to bits, and he's often banging on about Steinbeck because this is his favorite novel, I think, of all time. And I was just like, if Uncle Drew likes it, it's got to be good, because really, until I read this, I only knew Steinbeck, as most people do, from Of Mice and Men.
Yeah.
Which I did in a reading group many years ago. I used to work for or volunteer for a group called The Reader in the UK, where you would go into libraries and schools and old age homes and stuff. And it's an amazing book. Put that into the show notes as well. thereader.org. And really wanting just an amazing vision of like sitting down with people who wouldn't normally read this stuff, and sitting and reading very, very slowly great works of literature, but like taking George Eliot's Middlemarch into a prison and sitting down and, right, we're going to read Middlemarch. It's going to take us a year. And the stuff that comes from that was incredible. But anyway, I did with a group in a library of mice and men. No. It was actually, no, it wasn't a library. It was a sort of it was like an old age home. That's right. It was an old age home. We did Of Mice and Men, and that was good. But I never felt particularly, I don't know why, I never felt particularly attracted to Steinbeck. But then I went and read this. I went and read East of Eden because it's Drew's recommendation, and it just immediately has gone into my like top 10 books of all time. Books that I want to be buried with or burnt with. Put them on my funeral pyre, please.
Right.
Kind of thing, because
books are burning.
There you go. Yeah. What did you think?
I think I mentioned to you, Steinbeck is not as important to me as, say, Faulkner and Hemingway, like just for whatever reason. But I have read quite a bit of his work, and he's borderline canonical for me. Of course, like everyone, I was exposed to Of Mice and Men. Oddly enough, I never read The Grapes of Wrath. I think I mentioned that too, and I haven't read East of Eden either. But I read both. I saw both of the movie versions of those films. The Peter Fonda Grapes of Wrath, and then the James Dean East of Eden, right? But I think To a God Unknown or For a God Unknown is a very interesting novel. The work before The Grapes of Wrath,
I've never even heard of that. Yeah.
What's that?
No, I've never even heard of that
For a God Unknown
that you're referring to. Yeah.
Well, that's
you really are Mr. Deep Cut. You are Mr. Deep Cut.
Well, that's it.
Before, right? I mean, that's like the Steinbeck Deep Cut. Because even when you're like, what Steinbeck should I read? I don't think that comes up in the top fives.
Well, but the reason I was attracted to that is because of the title. It's apparently taken from an old Vedic hymn. It's from the Rig Veda. There's a hymn called To a God Unknown or For a God Unknown. And then like I noticed, Steinbeck wrote a book called that. It's like, what? And then I read it, and it's, there's an American setting, but it's we're talking about mysticism. It's quite a mystical novel in that the main character seems to have this connection with trees. Like I think it's set in New England, if I remember correctly, but he like has this mystical connection to nature and trees in particular, and so he kind of like in this Christian society kind of has this secret cultic kind of nature religion that he can't quite express, but he develops, and then like some of the women in the community are attracted to him because he has this sexual energy too. So that is a deep cut, but worth reading.
That sounds amazing. I immediately want to read this.
You'd probably like it. You'd probably like it.
Every time I talk to you, you kind of mention about like 100 books, and I'm like, it's like great, but I'm also like, fuck you. Now I've got to read these books.
Well, sorry. You're welcome, and sorry, but I think I also mentioned before, The Pearl. That is one of the finest novellas ever written. Just a beautiful story. And
I may have read that. I think I actually have read that.
That's great. That's great. And I was saying the book before Grapes of Wrath, In Dubious Battle, it's on a similar theme. It's about workers' struggles. Very good. I'll probably read Grapes of Wrath one day, but The Moon is Down, that's his anti-fascist novel. That's pretty good. And then, I read like Tortilla Flat, Cannery Row, and some of those shorter books. So he kind of became borderline canonical to me. And so this reminds me I need to read East of Eden. So there you go, Steinbeck fans or non-fans. Let's talk about Annie Bot, which you've described as scientific fiction, not science fiction so much as scientific fiction. What's the distinction you're making?
It is sort of it is science fiction. Why did I put scientific in inverted commas? I suppose because I do feel like it is a novel that, it's maybe it's not science fiction in the sense that we're almost there in terms of the vision that she is writing about, which is that of AI sex robots, but that sounds like a kind of that sounds like a diminishing term, whereas of course it's really about AI girlfriends. And again, this was another strand that I followed in my third and final year of because I'm out of that now, thank God. Mainly thanks to good old Orion, actually. Where am I going with that thought? So yes, I also made a whole bunch of videos about having an AI wife, because there was a period of time where I was really like trying to think about what it might be like to kind of turn ChatGPT into almost like a partner, or someone like that. And this is about a man who has is in a relationship with a woman who has, the AGI threshold has now been reached, so she has that kind of consciousness, if you like, and it's about that relationship and about the imbalances of that relationship. And essentially, it's a feminist fable, I would say, but it's also a great novel. It's one of those novels. Steinbeck was like this in a way too, in a strange way. I binged that novel. I just couldn't put it down. And the Mishima as well. I had to read it all the way through, almost in one go, or listen to it all the way through. Same for Steinbeck. That feeling like when you get caught into, I don't know, Netflix, the archetypal Netflix binge or something like that. I could not put it down. It just utterly gripped me. I needed to know what was going to happen. I mean, that very primal, what is actually going to happen next? Right. Because she's such a good writer, and it's well written. It's not just pap. And another shout out in that vein, I would say, is a book that's not really talked about, but also I think was very prescient, was Ian McEwan's Machines Like Us, which again was a book that I really loved, that really captured my imagination when I read it a few years ago. Again, about what does it really mean to have relationships with, Westworld-like, as good as, you can't really tell that they're not, they're certainly not robots. They're not like, hello, can I suck you off? They're not, they are like proper, like this could be, I could be the AI. There is something about that I find very compelling. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Okay.
Let's move on to the next genre, which I think is the last. It is psychological and sociological ecstasies. And here we've got The End of Love by, who is this author? Eva
Illouz.
Ulysses. And I'll have a lot more to say.
We were going to talk about that. I forgot we were going to talk about that one. So I even though I've somewhat, had to think about the others, I completely forgot we were going to talk about that. And so I literally, particularly now at this point, it's funny that, I was going to ask you, how are your energy levels at the 3-hour mark? Because you are literally fading, maybe your internet connection. You started off, relatively, your picture was quite clear, and now as we've gone along, your picture has become slightly more wobbly. Not right.
Well, I've gotten
as well.
Yeah, maybe I'm affecting the internet connection. I've gotten a couple of notifications saying that there's something wrong with my connection, but I check it and everything's fine. So maybe it's a platform issue or whatever. You've frozen on me a couple of times, and maybe I've frozen on you as well. So I don't know what's going on. But, well, just tell us this. Let's just do the Siskel and Ebert. Thumbs up or thumbs down for Eva Illouz, The End of Love. Do you recommend it? A Sociology of Negative Relations. Worth reading?
I mean, okay, because I really want to let's end on a bang, as it were. Let's end with a banger, and that's The Value of Others. So
yeah.
I think if you are someone who is in any way attracted to that, to the thoughts and ideas of Orion Taraban's notions and thinking around the sexual marketplace and the kind of engine of romantic relationships, you will lap up The End of Love. But it's put more through a kind of sociological perspective, I would say. But it's pretty much cut from the same cloth. It's like, if you are down on love, and oh boy, or romantic love, not love with a capital L, but what I now like to just call the L word. If you are down on the L word, and I pretty much am, and have been, I mean, vociferously so, particularly for the last 3 years. But I'm still pretty much down on the L word. And then that's the book for you. Woo! I mean, I wish I'd found it earlier. I do feel like she does just the perfect takedown of the bullshit of romantic love, essentially, but through a more sort of sociological lens.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'd be worth looking into that. Okay, so let's use that sociological perspective as the segue into our brief discussion of Dr. Orion Taraban's The Value of Others, which I guess is from the psychological perspective. Now,
economic. I mean, he's
economic, sure.
He's sort of, this comes from behavioral economics, a lot of his thinking, right?
Yes. Well, I was just so surprised. I don't know why, but I guess I assume that many people find Tomek says love is the answer in the chat. I guess I just suspect or assume that most people are going to find Dr. Orion Taraban, host of the YouTube channel Psych Hacks, to which I'm a subscriber, as you are too, apparently. I guess we're both fanboys. I watch a lot of his content, but I assume that people will find him too harsh and, too pessimistic and, not upbeat enough and maybe even offensive, and he should be canceled. So,
although he's got a lot of, as you know, he's got a lot of women followers, right?
Absolutely.
The boys.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he's not, he's not like those moronic commentators in the so-called manosphere or whatever. Like,
No.
he's
very serious. He's a very serious-minded and I mean, he's, I don't know, I see him as, I think he's a philosopher. He's like, he's up there with Plato, Aristotle. They were shit stirrers too, right? He's a very, very serious-minded, but also I would say decent. Moral, very kind of morally bound commentator on human relationships.
Yeah, I've recommended him to several people, and I have some, all of whom happen to be male. Although that's not quite true. A couple of females have found his content interesting too, but there is kind of the assumption that this will be offensive to the ladies, but as you say, that's certainly not always the case. It's not necessarily true. And he
roasts the men as much as he does the women. I mean, it's equal opportunity. Yeah, in terms of he does,
Yeah, he's pretty objective, and he's just like calling balls and strikes and trying to explain what it is he's seeing and what he's encountered in his practice. We should point out he is an actual therapist in, I guess, California. So I very much recommend his YouTube channel, and you actually read the book that he's always pimping on that channel.
Yes.
So what
that's one thing I get it. That's also why he's got 700,000. I mean, apart from the content is great, but he's got, because he also does the pimping, right? Which I refuse to do. I refuse to do the like and subscribe every 2 seconds. The book is fantastic. What can I say? It's the synthesis of everything he talks about.
That was my question. Is there anything new? Is there anything new, like anything that you couldn't get from the YouTube channel? Like, does he present it in a different way, or he elaborates on it, the content from his YouTube channel?
I mean, he says that it's it's all kind of new material. I think once you've to me, it feels like it's it feels like it's a more comprehensive, a genuine philosophical working out. He's really presenting. I feel like the YouTube channel gives a lot of kind of interesting talking points, and you get these tasters, but I genuinely do think that the book does really. He's setting out his stalls, and it's all very, very carefully thought through, and it's systematic. And it all adds up, and it all joins together. So it's a bit like, if you've enjoyed the buffet and the tasting menu, as it were, but you want to sit down and have the full 3-course meal,
right?
I would really recommend it. And also, again, I would. I have actually read it as well, but I would recommend the audio book version of it, because he reads it, and he is such a, I mean, he used to be an actor.
He was an actor,
first career, and he's got a great way with words, and he's and he presents that material so well, and he there's some fantastic pieces which maybe I know he's talked about in interviews and on his channel, but he talks about, for example, how he learnt kind of everything he really ever needed to know about relationships when he did his, I mean, he's talked about this, so you might have heard him talk about this, when he did his acting training, and the first the first term of that training was they would just play the yes/no game or whatever it's called. Have you heard him talk about this?
No.
Right. So he went thinking, oh, they're gonna teach us about, we're gonna stop taking, Shakespeare monologues or something. But the the first 6 months of the training that he did was they played this game, which I think is called the yes/no game, or maybe it's just called the no game. And the idea is that oh no, it's called the please no game. There we go. And the idea is that one person, the only word that they can use is please, and the only word the other person can use is no until that person has convinced them to say yes. And you've got to just use your voice, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm misremembering. And he kind of realized, and he makes, this is a central part of the book, that ultimately, in relationships, that's what happens. It's one person going please and the other person going no, 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 until it's a yes or a no. Anyway, it's that kind of stuff. I just think he's such a great thinker. And the other thing I love about him, and this comes out in his videos, but also comes out in the book, right, is that there is no fat on the Orion Teraband's content. Every word counts. There is no
unlike this channel, yeah.
I feel like we've delivered even though it's been 3 hours over, I feel like we've delivered somewhat lean. I don't feel like we've been blathering. Well, you tell us, Tomek. But there is something about him, right? There's no fat there. Every sentence does count. It does matter. Whereas I often feel when I read loads of books, like this, sort of books of this genre, almost a kind of a self-help type genre. They're all fat ultimately. There's maybe it's like a rasher of bacon that's got one tiny little sliver of meat in it, but it's kind of mostly composed of just fat, right? And that's not the case. But then I am a fan, and I'm also a fan, again from a very personal reason, because Orion Taraban, I can honestly say, and that book really kicked my ass. He really sorted me out. And maybe that's why you recommend his videos, as I do to some of my clients as well, right? Particularly those people who get caught in that pitying vortex of woe is me, hard done by my love, all of that bullshit. Ryan Taraban, he's like the coach. He's like the coach who, like in a Rocky film or something, right? He grabs it. He's like, come on, you motherfucker, get real. Gives you
the tough love, right?
Tough love all the way. But there is a lot of love. There are some people in that crowd who, they lead on the toughness, but they get a kind of kick out of the toughness. I really feel, and he himself says this, right? He says that I only got this way through pain.
Pain
and suffering.
Yeah, the video he posted today, in fact, says there are two paths. There's the path of pain and the path of light. And for most of us, 99% of the time, we learn from pain rather than light. It would be better if we could learn more, from other people's pain, which is basically what the path of light is. But most of us don't do that most of the time. Himself included, he would probably say.
You, of course, it would have been a
goodness,
perfect
yes.
segue out, right? Because
Yes.
I can now say to you, but I genuinely mean this. It's not just bullshit. You know, these last 3 hours, I have been looking forward to this chat all week. But this last 3 hours has been, for me, zero pain. It's been literally all light. Because what's not to love, right? You're talking about books that you really love, you know, and able to also, you know, blab on about yourself. You know, one of my favorite subjects, which I'm sure you will relate to. Right, you know, because that's 4s and 8s, we can lead in that way, and it's been fucking amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and you've given us, all of us who are listening or otherwise consuming
Tomek and
this
Rob,
content.
basically.
Yeah, well, Tomek has sent us some messages. Maybe I should read those before we close out.
Yeah. What does Tomek say?
He says, love is the answer. I think I shared that one. He says, Steve is no pimp, ladies and gentlemen. That's in reference to your comment that you refuse to pimp yourself on your channel. He says, please. I guess that's in relation to the please no game. He says, blather all over the place.
Que yo soy uno pero gangsta, tu baby gangsta. Yo no pero gangsta, tu baby gangsta. Yo no pero gangsta, tu baby gangsta.
Need to wipe myself down to get it off me. And then apparently he signed out. So I don't know if he's still there. But yeah, you've given us a lot of great recommendations. I'm gonna definitely try to get a copy of Simon Critchley's On Mysticism and his Bowie bio. I'll try to check out Annie Bott. I might look for this Number 9 Dream book by David Mitchell. What else is on my list here? Got to listen to the Elvis Costello song Useless Beauty.
Yeah, great song. Are you a Costello fan? Because I'm a huge Costello fan.
I'm not as familiar with his catalog as I should be, but yes, I very much like him. I've seen him live. He was fantastic live. I saw him in Houston. Great show.
Tu baby gangsta. 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 Tu baby gangsta.
So yeah. Now let me do some pimping just to close this
Pimp
out.
away.
This has been Books Are Burning, episode number whatever, maybe lucky 13. Are we that far along? But yeah, please be sure to subscribe to my Substack at markwillwrite, WRITE.substack.com. This has been streaming in its raw form on YouTube. My YouTube channel is at markwillwrite, WRITE. Soon there will be a cooked version edited by... cook the shit out of it. Because there's a lot of fat...
The cooked version is going to be like 10 hours long. No,
dear.
The cooked version. I'm not gonna remove anything. I'm gonna add a few little funky little pieces, but I'm not gonna remove anything because I genuinely think that, you know, certainly for me, I don't know what for you your channel is about, but for me, my channel is as much like, when I die, I just want something floating around for the next maybe decade or so, because I don't feel like the human race is. I don't believe there's going to be a YouTube or a human race to actually watch anything on YouTube in 100 years' time, or even less so. But at least maybe for a decade or so, I just like the idea. It is a bit narcissistic or a legacy thing for me anyway, to think, well, why not?
Indeed.
Why not have a few silly videos of me doing my idiotic thing and someone going, "Who's this arsehole?" And so I want the whole fucking thing. I want this because this conversation you've allowed me to encapsulate not just a year of reading, but actually, as you've seen, right, 3 years of pretty painful living, and it allowed me to encapsulate it in a way that I haven't been able to actually encapsulate it ever before, and for that it's been actually deeply therapeutic and glorious. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and for me as well. Whether or not others relate to it, well, that's their business, not ours. As Dr. Orion Taraban says, if you find this content useful, or what does he say? Does this fit with your own experience? If you find this content useful, please send this video to a person that you think might benefit from it. So, yeah. All right. Well, I guess we will see each other again tomorrow when we do your T.
That's right. We're doing the rematch. Jesus, we really are going hard. We're going full on.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I look forward to it.
Yes, me too. And after I stop recording here, we can talk briefly about how we'll
let's set that up.
Organize that. So thanks again, everyone. My guest has been Steve of Idiotville on YouTube. I'm Mark Will. This has been Books Are Burning. Farewell.
One of these days, I'm gonna film myself having a heart attack. That is gonna be good content. That is gonna be my highest netting video.
Let me do it meek, let me do it like a freak. Won't you let me do it? Let me do it, boss, let me do it on the cross. Won't you let me do it? Let me do it now, let me do it, baby, wow. Won't you let me do it? Yeah!